Okay, I'm starting. Good morning, CMS 7th graders. Me and my friend here on my shoulder, Tinkerbell, we have decided that it is time to read Chapter 5 to you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed Chapter 4. Camden Axe sure enjoyed his shout out as being the village fisherman. So here goes Chapter 5, a little longer than the other ones. The school teacher's daughter told me that her dog has 3 puppies. I can have one when it's big enough if I like. Isn't she the one who promised you a kiss? Now a dog as well? I'd settle for the kiss if I were you, Mattie. The blind man smiled. He loosened a beet from the earth and placed it in the basket of vegetables. They were in the garden together. I miss my dog. He wasn't any trouble. Mattie glanced over the corner of their home place's plot of land beyond the garden to the small grave where they had buried Branch 2 years before. You're right, Mattie. Your little dog was a good companion for many years. It would be fun to have a puppy around. The blind man's voice was gentle. I could train a dog to lead you. I don't need leading. Could you train a dog to cook? Anything but beets, Mattie said, making a face as he threw another into the basket. But when he went in the afternoon to the schoolteacher's home place, Mattie found Jean distraught. 2 died last night, she said. They took sick. Now there's only 1 puppy left, and it's sick, and the mother as well. How have you tended them? Jean shook her head in despair. Same as I would for my father and myself, infusion of white willow bark. But the puppy's too little to drink, and the mother's too sick. She laughed a bit and then just put her head down. Will you take me to see them? Jean led me into the small house, and though he was concerned for the dogs, Mattie found himself looking around as they walked through, remembering what the blind man had asked. He noticed the sturdy furniture, neatly arranged, and the bookcases filled with Mentor's books. In the kitchen, Jean's barking pans and the bowls in which she mixed dough were set out, ready for her wonderful breads to be made. He saw nothing that hinted of a trade, nothing silly like a gaming machine, nothing frivolous like the soft, upholstered furniture decorated with fringe that a foolish young couple down the road had traded for. Of course, there were other kinds of trades, Mattie knew, though he didn't fully understand. He heard murmurs about them. There were trades for things you didn't see. Those were the most dangerous trades. They're in here. Jean opened the door to the storage shed attached to the house at the back of the kitchen. Matt entered and knelt beside the mother dog where she lay on a folded blanket. The tiny puppy, motionless, but for its labored breathing, lay in the curve of her belly, the way any puppy would. But a healthy puppy would have wiggled and sucked. This one should have been pawing at its mother for milk. Mattie knew dogs. He loved them. Gently he touched the puppy with his finger. Then, startled, he jerked his hand away. He had felt something painful. Oddly, it made him think of lightning. He remembered that he had been instructed, even as a small boy back in his old place, to go indoors during a thunderstorm. He had seen a tree split and blackened by a lightning strike. He knew that it could happen to a human. The flash and the burning power that would surge through you, looking for a place to enter the earth. He had smelled through the window and seen great fiery bolts split the sky, and he had smelled the sulphurous smell that they sometimes left behind. There was a man in village, a farmer, who had stood in the field beside his plow, waiting as dark clouds gathered overhead, hoping the storm would pass by. The lightning had found him there, and though the farmer had survived, he had lost all his memory but for the sensation of raw power that had entered him that afternoon. People tended him now, and he helped with farm chores, but his energy was gone, taken away by the mysterious energy that lived in lightning. Mattie had felt this sensation, the one of pulsating power, as if he had the power of lightning within his own self, in the clearing, on a sunny day with no storm brewing. He had tried to put it out of his mind afterward, any thoughts of the day it had happened, because it frightened him so and made him have a secret which he did not want. But Mattie knew, pulling his hand from the ailing puppy, it was time to test it once again. Where's your father? He asked Jean. He wanted no one to watch. He had a meeting to go to. You know about the petition. Mattie nodded. Good. School teacher was not around. I don't think he really even cares about the meeting. He just wants to see Stocktender's widow. He's courting her. Jean spoke with affectionate amusement. Can you imagine courting at his age? He needed the girl to be gone, Maddie thought. I want you to go to herbalist. Get yarrow. I have yarrow in my own garden, right beside the door, Jean replied. He didn't need yarrow, not really. He needed her gone. Maddie thought quickly. Spearmint? Lemon balm? Catnip? Do you have all those? She shook her head. No catnip. If cats were attracted to my garden, the dog would make a terrible fuss. Wouldn't you, poor thing, she said sweetly, leaning down to murmur to the dying mother dog. She stroked the dog's back, but it didn't lift its head. Its eyes were beginning to glaze. Go, Maddie told her in an urgent voice. Get those things. Do you think they'll help? Jean asked dubiously. She took her hand from the dog and stood, but she lingered. Just go, Maddie ordered. You needn't use a rude tone, Maddie, Jean said with an edge in her voice, but she turned with a flounce of her skirt and went. He barely heard the sound of the door closing behind her. Steeling himself against the painful, vibrating shock that he knew would go through his entire body, Maddie placed his left hand on the mother dog, his right on the puppy, and he willed them to live. An hour later, Maddie stumbled home exhausted, back at Mentor's house. Jean was feeding the mother dog and giggling at the antics of the lively puppy. Who would have thought of that combination of herbs? Isn't it amazing, she had said in delight, watching the creatures revive. Lucky guess. He let Jean believe it was the herbs. She was distracted by the sudden liveliness of the dogs and didn't even notice how weak Maddie was. He sat leaning against the wall in the shed and watched her tend them, but his vision was slightly blurred and his whole body ached. Finally, when he had regained a little strength, he forced himself to stand and leave. Fortunately, his own home place was empty. The blind man was out somewhere. Maddie was glad of that. Sear would have noticed something wrong. He could always feel it. He said the atmosphere in the home place changed, as if wind had shifted, if Maddie had so much as a cold. And this was much more. He staggered into his room off the kitchen and lay down on his bed, breathing hard. Maddie had never felt so weak, so drained, except for the frog. The frog was smaller, he thought, but it was the same thing. He had come across the little frog by chance in the clearing. He had no reason to be there that day. He had simply wanted to be alone, away from busy village, and had gone into forest to get away, as he did sometimes. Barefoot, he had stepped on the frog and was startled. Sorry, he had said playfully, and he reached down to pick the little fellow up. Are you all right? You should have hopped away when you heard me coming. The frog wasn't all right, and it couldn't have escaped with a hop. It hadn't been Maddie's light step that had injured it. He could see that right away. Some creature, Maddie thought probably a fox or a weasel, had inflicted a terrible wound upon the small green thing. The frog was almost dead of it. One leg dangled, torn away from the body, held there only by an oozing bit of ragged tissue. In his hand, the frog drew a shuddering breath and then was still. Someone chewed you up and spit you out, Maddie said. He was sympathetic but matter of fact. The hard life and quick death of forest creatures were everyday things. Well, he said, I'll give you a nice burial. He knelt to dig out a spot with his hands in the mossy earth. But when he tried to set the little body down, he found he was connected to it in a way that made no sense. A painful kind of power surged from his hand. Flowing into the frog, it held them bound together. Confused and alarmed, he tried to scrape the sticky body off the frog off his hand, but he couldn't. The vibrating pain held them connected. After a moment, while Maddie knelt, still mystified by what was happening, the frog's body twitched. So you're not dead. Get off me then. Now he was able to drag the frog to the ground. The stab of pain eased. What was that all about? Maddie found himself talking to the frog as if it might be able to reply. I thought you were dead, but you weren't. You're going to lose your leg, though. Your hopping days are over. I'm sorry for that. He stood and looked down at the impassive frog. Chirrump. Its throat made the sound. Yes, I agree. Same to you. Maddie turned to leave. Chirrump. The sound compelled him to go back and to kneel again. The frog's wide-open eyes, which had been glazed with death only a few moments before, were now clear and alert. It stared at Maddie. Look, I'm going to put you over here in the ferns because if you stay in the open, some other creature will come along and gobble you up. You have a big disadvantage now in not being able to hop away. You will have to learn to hide." He picked up the frog and carried it to a thicket of high ferns. "If I had my knife with me," he told it, "I'd probably just slice through those threads that are holding your leg. Maybe you could heal more quickly. As it is, you'll be dragging that leg around and it's going to burden you. There's nothing I can do." He leaned down to turn it loose, still thinking about how best to help it. "Maybe I could find a sharp rock and slice through. It's just a tiny bit of flesh, and it probably wouldn't even pain you if I did it." "You stay right here," Matty commanded. He placed the frog on the fern beside the ferns. As if it could hop, he thought. Back at the edge of the small stream he had crossed, Matty found what he needed as a tool, a bit of a rock with a sharp edge. He took it back to where the wounded frog lay, immobilized by its wound. "Now," Matty told the frog, "don't be scared. I'm going to spread you out a bit and then carefully cut that dead leg away. It's the best thing for you." He turned the frog onto its back and touched the shredded leg, meaning to arrange it in a way that would make the amputation simple and fast. There were only a few sticky strands of flesh to slice through. But he felt a sudden jolt of painful energy enter his arm, concentrated in his fingertips. Matty was unable to move. His hand grasped the nearly severed leg, and he could feel his own blood moving through its vessels. His pulse thrummed, and he could hear the sound of it. Terrified, Matty held his breath for what seemed forever. Then it all stopped. The thing that had happened ended. He lifted his hand tentatively from the wounded dog, or the wounded frog. Chirrump, chirrump. "I'm leaving now. I don't know what happened, but I'm leaving now." He dropped the sharp rock and tried to rise, but his knees were weak and he felt dizzy and sick. Still kneeling beside the frog, Matty took a few long breaths, trying to get his strength again so he could flee. "Chirrump." "Stop it. I don't want to hear that." As if it understood what Matty had said, the frog turned, flopping itself over from its belly-up position, and moved toward the ferns. But it was not dragging a useless leg. Both legs were moving awkwardly, to be sure, but the frog was propelling itself with both legs. It disappeared into the clump of quivering ferns. After a moment, Matty was able to stand. Desperately tired, he made his way out of forest and stumbled home. Now, lying on his bed, he felt the same exhaustion magnified. His arms ached. Matty thought about what had happened. The frog was very small. This was 2 dogs. This was bigger. "I must learn to control it," Matty told himself. Then, surprisingly, he began to cry. "Hey, what do you need, Tinkerbell?" Matty had a boyish pride in the fact that he never cried, but now he wept, and it felt as if the tears were cleansing him, as if his body needed to empty itself. Tears ran down his cheeks. Finally, shuddering with exhaustion, he wiped his eyes, turned on his side, and slept, though it was still midday. The sun was high in the sky over the village. Matty dreamed of vague, frightening things connected to pain, and his body was tense even as he slept. Then his dream changed. His muscles relaxed, and he became serene in his sleep. He was dreaming now of healed wounds, new life, and calm. Well, that's chapter 5. I'll be honest, I was pretty clueless. I think it was at the end of chapter 1 or 2, when Matty was talking to the frog and then went back to Seer. Well, now we know that, I don't know if he's able to speak and communicate with the creature, but clearly he has discovered he has a secret power that we didn't know of back then. So that's pretty cool. Second off, it doesn't appear that Seer or the girl are suspicious or know of Matty's power. We'll see if the other people figure that out in time to come. And last but not least is I read the first part, and we discovered what happened to Branch, who would have died, who's Matty's special dog 2 years ago. I thought I'd give a shout out to Ellie Shrub. I know Ellie is a huge dog lover. She has told me and written to me so many things this school year about dogs, and more dogs. Whether it was a journal, a book talk, whatever it was, Ellie is a dog princess queen. You guys have a great night. Be safe and do your schoolwork. And tomorrow's Wednesday, so you are halfway done with the week. And tomorrow I'll make sure to get you chapter 6. Okay? Okay, be safe. Bye bye.